Yeah.
Welcome back to the show. One of the things that maybe this is the silver lining in this situation, besides the fact that Vladimir Putin seems increasingly isolated, even amongst his own folks, I would say, is the peace protests that are going on, especially in Russia right now. It's one thing, it's great that they're happening in Lithuania and Latvia and Sweden and in the United States and in Germany, France, and in the UK, and people are surrounding Russian embassies, putting yellow and blue flowers in front of the Ukrainian embassy and in front of the Russian embassies in places and in Washington, D.C. But it is the protests that in Russia that are the most heartening because they are illegal. Because 1,700 people have been arrested. And when you get arrested in Russia for that kind of thing, it's the real deal.
I bet that sucks.
Yeah. And I mean, Alexei Navalny got arrested and put in jail and just got his sentence, I think, extended 15 years for leaving the country to get medical help because he'd been poisoned by Vladimir Putin. And if he hadn't gone and gotten that help, he'd have died. And then he got that help, recovered in the hospital, and came back. Again, that level of bravery.
And really, he should have gone to like the Philippines or something, anywhere else.
Right. Well, I mean, or just if he'd have gone to Ukraine, Lord knows this probably would have started faster. But if he'd gone to, Lithuania or Belarus or one of these other countries, and they, it made it a little more complicated for them because it was a Russian aligned territory, but not Russia itself. Maybe, he wouldn't be in jail right now, but he wouldn't have been able to run against Putin anyways. That's the problem. So anyways, there are people being arrested just for holding up signs, just for walking around saying, like that this is an unjustified attack.
And this needs to be witnessed by the right wingers in this country who say that their free speech is being denied.
Right.
They need to understand what that really means.
Or that the truckers who blocked roads that stopped, ambulances and school buses and people driving to and from the store and to their jobs from doing that for days on end for no reason, because it was, because a small percentage of the 10% of truckers that aren't vaccinated decided they were going to gack up everything until their will overwhelmed the 90% of truckers, much less the majority of Canadians. The heads of it, the people who coordinated, got arrested because it was an illegal protest because they were using vehicles to block roads, and their trucks got towed. Boo-hoo. Now, the question about the GoFundMe stuff, which I don't support, Trudeau doing that action. I think that's a bridge too far. But at the same time, isn't an American thing. We don't have the right or the ability to do that in the United States. We wouldn't be able to do that. We just have to do that with social pressure, which they think is the same thing as censorship, when those companies have absolutely every right to go, nah, we're going to keep it. We're just going to keep raising money. It's good for our bottom line, and we don't care. We can lose some of the other business to gain this business. We don't care. But the people standing in the streets in St. Petersburg and in Moscow who are risking detention under Vladimir Putin, pushing back against his attack on Ukraine, is incredibly heartening and a beautiful thing to see. Now, I was part of the groups that protested against going into Iraq both times. We went down to downtown LA and there were lots of protests against going into Iraq under H.W. Bush, and then again under W. There was some, some people grouped it together, no Iraq, no Afghanistan at all. Some people were like, well, Afghanistan makes sense because it's counterterrorism, but not to occupy, blah, blah, blah. There was, that was the good one. Iraq was the bad one, but Iraq made no sense. And so there was a lot of protests in the United States, and it didn't get nearly the coverage it needed. That was one of the problems I had at the time, while during the Bush presidency, was all these people showing up on the streets to push back against us going into Iraq. And right now, that equivalent is happening in Russia. Russians are standing up, and they're going down to their capitals and to their city squares, and they're protesting. Difference is the crowd that's gathering in St. Petersburg, although, just a few thousand. I was part of a couple of crowds that gathered in Los Angeles that were only a few thousand in front of the courthouse and other places about Iraq. And we weren't in danger of losing our lives and our livelihoods and getting locked up for 10 years. There were about 3,000 of us at any given time. We're like, oh, look at this. This is great. People really care. People were making signs and holding them up. And it was good and a beautiful thing that people would come down to downtown LA and protest, and downtown Seattle and protest, and all these other things. But the size of the group was equal to what you're seeing in St. Petersburg, and every single one of these people could get arrested and genuinely sentenced for a long time for doing this. And they're not doing Capitol rioter stuff. They're not doing Jan 6 stuff. They're not running up there, busting windows, flying, flags of a Confederacy or Nazi flags inside the state buildings in St. Petersburg. They're just walking in the street, holding up cardboard signs, handwritten. And hats off to them. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And the fact that the truckers are squealing, or that right wingers in this country are squealing about the right to blockade streets or ports of entry in Canada is embarrassing by comparison. Especially because what are they ultimately going against? Mask and vaccine mandates that were put in place for their safety by people that they were part of the electoral process in electing. I'm sure a bunch of them didn't vote for Justin Trudeau, but that's how the cookie crumbles sometimes. And say what you will about the protests around, the Women's March, for example, when Trump got elected. They didn't blockade Washington. They marched, showed, their feeling, and then they mobilized for the next election. And it worked. And we got the House. Yeah. And then they kept mobilizing. And we got the Senate. Just barely. We got 48 senators, kids. 48. We do not have 50. Knock that garbage off. There are 2 independents that caucus with the Democrats. They are not Democrats. We have managed to elect 48 Democrats in the Senate. We used to have close to 60. There's no reason why we couldn't again. We just got to do the work. Now, obviously, you're not going to be able to be a purist about that. You're not going to be able to only elect, I guess, Ron Wyden clones all across, bless his heart, across the entire country. You're going to have to deal with some Kristen Sinemas and some Joe Manchins. But if you can get that number up to 60, then you don't have to bust the filibuster to get done what you need to get done. Then there's no excuse. Then we can have up or down votes on all kinds of stuff. But it's up to us, the voter, to guarantee that space. And anybody who's like, we won, we gave it to them, and what did we get out of it? Well, first of all, you got an infrastructure bill for the first time in 25 years. You got a rescue package that saved the economy. You got an actual vaccination plan and a plan to get schools open and businesses open that you didn't have under Trump. You got out of Afghanistan. You're going to get the first black woman SCOTUS. You're going to get these promises kept unless you muck around and find out and decide, well, a lesser of two evils being what it is, and who cares if the Senate Majority Leader is Ted Cruz next time. I'm sure it won't have any ill effects on any of the goals we have to keep the country secure, keep the country healthy, better people's lives. I honest to God, until we have super majorities in the House and Senate, I don't want to hear from anybody saying we gave it to him, we got it for him, we did it, we did all the work, and what are we getting in exchange? You're getting an amazing amount of stuff considering the vote has to be split by the vice president. Yeah. Harmon went to D.C. get 2 senators. Yeah, D.C. is not going to become a state. That's never going to happen. Puerto Rico, though, that's what we need to talk about. Puerto Rico becoming a state. That's here's what happens, kids. You get 60 senators or 55, and you start moving towards statehood for Puerto Rico. That'll happen. You'll get some Republicans on board with that because the Latino community is not necessarily automatically Democratic. There's a lot of conservatives. There's a lot of pro-life Catholics in that group. It'd be a real fight to maintain Puerto Rico, but we'd have a much better, fighting chance than the Republicans would because of their disdain for all things brown these days. That's crucial. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this with the happy ending, and hopefully we have one. I mean, it's a crazy, crazy world, man. It's a crazy world.
Crazy world.
Peace marches is something to be happy about.